Hello, everyone. LC Holt here, and this is my update for the week of April the 6th. We're still social distancing here on the show, but
I'm on the moon.
that doesn't mean we can't take an hour and talk about Rob Zombie's Halloween here with
Hmm.
Rebecca Ivey, as always.
As
Rebecca,
always, you're like, she's back again.
she's,
Jesus.
she's back again. And now we're going to talk about some Rob Zombie. Good old Rob Zombie started out as a frontman for a band called White Zombie.
Yep, I remember the MTV Movie Award, well, Music Awards in the '90s. Remember he showed up that car and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Living Dead Girl.
kookiness.
He has
Yeah.
some good songs. Actually, a lot of his songs I really like, even in his solo stuff. I
Hmm.
think that he has an interesting style. It's kind of
Hmm.
it's horror centric, obviously, but it's sort of tongue in cheek to some degree. Uh, the Hellbilly Deluxe and everything. Very interesting stuff. Um,
The I have to say, the first time I saw him on the Music Awards, when they drove up in the, I was like, oh, someone must be a big fan of the Munsters because of that kind of
yeah,
kooky, you
and
know,
that's a part of his.
retro
Uh,
horror.
Retro is a great way of putting it. That's part of his overall aesthetic. He likes old horror. I remember seeing him on the Sci-Fi Channel a year when they showed all the Evil Dead movies, and obviously for television at that particular point in time, the movies were just butchered. You could, especially the first one. The latter half of the first one on the Sci-Fi Channel was just incomprehensible. But he was hosting it, and he was like he did the little segments in between the films where he would introduce it and stuff. And that's when I first saw Rob Zombie. Then later he became a director of a lot of his own music videos. And
Hmm.
then after that, he did a movie called House of a Thousand Corpses in 2003, which most
Hmm.
of the people watching probably know that I have some connection to because, I did a film with Bill Moseley and Tom Tolles. Actually, when I did the first film with Bill Moseley, Homesick, House of a Thousand Corpses had been shot. There was a long break between it being shot and it coming out. There was some question of whether it would come out. It was just about to come out while we were shooting with Bill Moseley on Homesick. Came out, became a real big hit with horror fans and just in general because it was a fairly low budget movie.
Hmm.
And that was the first film that Rob Zombie wrote and directed. After that, of course, he did The Devil's Rejects, which is still a lot of people's favorite movie of his. He loves the 1970s sort of feel. He likes things to be gritty and raw, real, the handheld cameras, a lot of dirty underwear and just gross
Yeah.
white trash type people.
When you first said
That's
like gritty and like rough, I was like, oh, so is he like Dark Shadows with like, the camera moving and someone walking through?
yeah. No,
Sorry, bad joke.
his version of it is more like a sick.
Dirty.
Well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the
Yeah.
original.
Yeah.
It has that sort of feeling to it. Very very realistic and very white
Not
trash.
Hollywood. Not Hollywood horror.
Not particularly, which is kind of interesting because Halloween is for the most part a Hollywood sort of franchise. At this time, it was owned by Dimension Films, the Weinsteins. Well, I say it was financed and distributed by them. It would have always been owned by the Akkad family. They were sort of like they were to Halloween what the Salkins were to the original Superman
Hmm.
film. The only difference was when the times got rough, Salkins sold their shit, and the Accads have been holding on to the Halloween franchise with an iron grip for 40 something years at this point. Now, Mustafa Akkad, who was the Syrian American film producer who discovered John Carpenter in the sense that he gave him the big shot to make Halloween. He produced the original film and he
Hmm.
retained all rights. He was born in the now infamous Aleppo in Syria. Um, Unfortunately, Mustafa Akkad died in a terrorist bombing in Jordan in November of 2005. That was 3 years after the previous Halloween movie, which was Halloween Resurrection, the infamous Halloween Resurrection co-starring Busta Rhymes. That was such a horrible
I
movie.
remember when that one came out. I think we talked about that when it was coming. We were like, what? Why is Busta Rhymes doing in a Halloween?
Busta Rhymes, otherwise known as Trevor George Smith Jr. I guess
Yes.
I guess that doesn't have the same ring as Busta Rhymes. Well,
Busta Rhymes.
the Busta Rhymes thing came about because I think primarily because they had just done Halloween H2O, which was the first film in which Jamie Lee Curtis came back, um, 20 years after she did the original, and that was a huge hit. But it had LL Cool J in it.
Yeah.
But the difference between LL Cool J in Halloween H2O and Busta Rhymes in Halloween Resurrection is in Halloween H2O, LL Cool J played a character.
Yeah.
He played a guard. It wasn't like he was playing LL Cool J.
Yeah.
But I think they got in their minds, well, you had one successful rapper who was playing in this movie that made a lot of money, and that seemed to work. The crowd really liked that character, Ronnie, the guard. So let's get Busta Rhymes for
He was
the
popular.
next.
He's popular right now.
Yeah, and so that's what they did. But the only difference with Busta Rhymes is Busta Rhymes was basically Busta Rhymes. He was just like had all these scenes. Tyra Banks was in it too. Before
now
her.
you're starting to like rejog my memory because the more you're talking about, like, yeah, I remember this now. Yes.
Busta Rhymes, most of his scenes with Michael Myers consist of him going, "Hey, Michael, I'm gonna kick your ass, Michael Myers," and you go, doesn't this kind of undercut the scare of the character to have a washed up rapper insulting him in every scene? I mean, it just
Busta's gonna come after you for that.
It's one of those things where you could tell when they made it, the audience, I mean, the director and the producer were like, "Oh, the audience, they're trying to stand up and cheer that line. They're going to be quoting this for years," and nobody did because
do you think they were trying to do what do you call it? I call it the Will Smith character in Independence Day.
Yeah, the kind of Welcome to Earth type character.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. But anyway, so Halloween Resurrection in 2002, it did fine. It was also the movie that, Jamie Lee Curtis came back for like 15 minutes at the beginning of the movie and got dropped off the top of the building. And you just kind of went, oh, so that's how Laurie dies. Great.
Yeah, you're just kind of like, she has survived my Myers all these years.
And then years later, she would return yet again. Only in the upteenth continuity where she's not his sister and all that. But we already did a show about the modern Halloweens. We're gonna stick to Rob Zombie's Halloween for this show. And so moving into that, as I said, Mustafa Akkad died in a bombing in 2005, leaving the rights to the film series to his family. Malik Akkad, his son, took over as primary producer on the films, and Malik and Bob Weinstein. He's the Weinstein that's not skeezy. They got together, they put their heads together, and they decided, what if we reinvented this whole thing? You know what I mean? And their idea for reinventing this whole thing was to have Rob Zombie, who, as I had said before, in the whole build-up to this, just did House of a Thousand Corpses and the very successful Devil's Rejects. He had them. They had the idea of him writing and directing the new Halloween, writing, directing, co-producing, and being music supervisor on the new Halloween. Now, Rob lit well to the idea. He was going to get a bigger budget, and he was going to be able to do some of his own things. He actually went through this whole process of having getting John Carpenter on the phone, and he wanted to get his permission out of respect. Which, nice enough. John Carpenter told him, look, man, make it your own. That was his sole bit of advice, is just make it your own. Later, John Carpenter would come out and have his own opinions about how the film turned out, but it seemed like he was okay with it at the time. The thing about the whole deal is I don't think John Carpenter really cared what Rob Zombie did, because at this point, John Carpenter was so removed from this whole Halloween thing. He was like, just make another one. That sounds great. Use my music and I'll get a check for the music. Because, by the way, Carpenter always gets a check for the theme song that he wrote. So I don't really think he had any problem with it. It helped him to stay at home and play video games and watch basketball, which at this particular point in time was something John Carpenter said he enjoyed doing quite a lot. Um, Now, the thing about Rob Zombie is his approach to Michael Myers was he wanted to reinvent the character. He said that the character had become too familiar, like Michael Myers, like Freddy Krueger, like Pinhead.
Mm-hmm.
He said that the audience became too familiar with the character and therefore it was no longer scary.
Yeah.
So he wanted to try and do something different. And I say that's great. Do something different. If you must remake something, at least as John Carpenter said, make it your own. So he wanted to get back into the scariness while at the same time making shit gritty, making it dark, making it Rob Zombie. He wanted to delve deeper into the backstory of Michael Myers, which is obvious when you watch the movie. He wanted to give an explanation of the mask because as you see in the movie, you see where the mask came from in great detail, that it was Michael Myers' slutty sister. Her boyfriend wore the mask and wanted to have sex with her wearing the mask. And, all very Rob Zombie, very weird and kinky and sick,
Yeah.
I'm sure he was wearing dirty underwear too, because Rob Zombie. But yeah. But even going further into the whole explanation for the mask, Michael Myers, the idea is that he hides his psychopathy behind the mask. That's what Rob Zombie came up with, because Rob Zombie wanted it really to be like, okay, Michael Myers is a classic. The way you think of Ted Bundy as being a psychopath. We're going to go down the road if it's realistic, even though he's 8 feet tall.
But do you feel like showing so much of his backstory, it did kind of ruin the mystery?
I think that's what a lot of the fans say, and I wish we could be on a show right now, where we were live with the fans, because I would love to know what their opinion was, because there are a lot of fan opinions about.
Yeah, I've seen. I was reading some of them. Some people they really like it, or they just go, that was just it took you 50 minutes to even get to present day. Took too long. You totally killed the mystique of the character. Some people said it was too gory. Some people said it wasn't gory. It's just really, reading what people thought of this movie. It's kind of, but the one thing that I see of people's criticism was, and I kind of felt that way, was that, I didn't really need to see him as much of him growing up, because he's creepy, and it's kind of like, well, it also kind of felt like you're supposed to feel sorry for him or something.
Yes, I think that's a good point. Yeah, and because let me give you the two sides, and you tell me what you think.
Okay.
Here's the original conception of Michael Myers as invented by John Carpenter. Uh-huh. John Carpenter's idea is it doesn't matter who Michael Myers is. As he used to refer to him in the script, he was just the shape, a shape in the darkness, a force of nature. You didn't need to know why he was the way he was, or where he went crazy or anything. All you need to know is little boy killed their sister, stopped speaking altogether, went into an asylum, years later broke out, and now for some reason is going back to kill people in his hometown. In part 2, you realize he's going to kill his sister. Because she wasn't his sister in part 1, but that was added in part 2. The thing about Rob Zombie, she's always his sister. Boo. Morning, boo. One of my cousin's favorite lines is William Forsythe in this, saying "Morning, boo," making fun of little Michael Myers, because Michael Myers in the remake, and this goes to the contrast of the John Carpenter thing. He speaks as a little boy.
Yeah.
You get the sense that he's always been a little nuts because he's killing rats. It's a fucking rat, man.
And just I don't know. It's kind of, I know you were going to ask me my opinion on these two things, but in real life, when you hear about serial killers and stuff, you don't really know why they do it. You never get an answer. I mean, they might say, oh, we noticed so-and-so did this as a kid and this kind of happened, but sometimes there really isn't any, or you you just never know. It's never.
And I guess you're led to believe in this film that Michael has, is the psychopath through nature to some extent, but then it was made worse.
Nurture.
Was made worse by the fact that he had the abusive stepfather, who's abusive but is really played for laughs too, because all the funny lines come from William Forsythe.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he has the mother who's very loving in this, because you didn't really know who Michael Myers' parents were. In the last one, a lot of fans said, well, of course, because who cares?
Yeah.
But in this one, you learn that his mother is Rob Zombie's wife, of course, because it wouldn't be a Rob Zombie movie without Sherry Moon Zombie.
That's right.
I think one thing we can say for absolute certain is that we will never hear the words, and the Academy Award goes to Sherry Moon Zombie for the Dorothy Stratton story.
Yes.
We will never hear this. But I have to say,
we're living in crazy times.
I tell you, at this point, who knows what is possible? Let me just say this though. I do think it's kind of nice and cute that Rob Zombie loves his wife and wants to work with her in every single movie. Obviously, he's the only person really willing to cast her in anything, because why would you? But she in some movies she does an okay job. I actually don't mind her in this movie, playing the mother. I think she doesn't. I think she does an okay job. When we get to Halloween 2, which we'll get to here in just a few minutes, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, because you have to remember there are many.
They're different.
At this point, you have to remember that there's 1978 Halloween, then there's the 1981 Halloween 2, then there is Halloween 2007, then there's Halloween 2009, then there's Halloween 2018, then there's the Halloween Kills that's coming out next year now. So there's like 3 different movies called Halloween. They're all in different continuities.
Yeah. Do you think they'll stop with like, oh, we're having different, continuities for the same characters? It gets a little old. Do you feel that way? It's just kind of like.
Well, and one of the first videos I did for this channel was trying to explain Halloween continuity, and it's hard to make heads nor tails of it.
Yeah.
Because you have to go, okay, well, in this continuity, 1, 2 exist, and then H2O and Resurrection. Oh, but in this continuity, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 exist, but not this. Oh, and in this continuity.
And then in part 3, there's just Halloween masks that kill all the children,
Yeah, and then that's out of all
Season of the Witch, which was what he originally wanted to do anyway. Each movie was supposed to be a different scary thing that happened on Halloween, correct?
An anthology film.
Yeah, an anthology, yeah.
Yeah, that was the original idea. But anyway, going back to Rob Zombie's Halloween, Laurie is explored. As you said, most of the movie's basically broken down into 3 acts. You have Act 1, which is Michael as a little boy, which ends with Michael killing his sister and her oversexed boyfriend and the stepfather, killing Ronnie. And then, it ends with him going into getting arrested. And then in Act 2, it's him in the asylum with Dr. Loomis, who is in this instance played by the great Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah, that's kind of cool that he played him. But
I thought that was the best bit of casting. When I first heard that he was cast in that, I was like, my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I do think he's really good. He's extraordinarily funny. And as we get on into the second film, in the Rob Zombie continuity, his character changes in a lot of ways that the original character sort of didn't. Donald Pleasance stayed the same. I love Donald Pleasance. You can't change the Donald Pleasance Loomis. I mean, why else would you watch certain films in that fucking franchise if not for Donald Pleasance?
Right.
Because, past a certain point, as is the case with most of these horror franchises, it's like the story is worn so thin that they're following a formula and grasping at straws to try and make this somehow interesting.
They're like, oh, let's put him in a rocket ship. Oh,
and it does seem like
drag race some people. I don't know, just pulling at straws and out, like probably what they do in their pitch meetings.
It does seem like a lot of these franchises, they survive based on the fact that you have one good actor who's willing to return, if you have like say Hellraiser, which went off the rails like after part 3, you have
Yeah.
you have Doug, who is willing to return up until a certain point.
Yes.
And then, but with Halloween, even better, you had a character like Dr. Loomis, who was a great character, and you had Donald Pleasance returning up until the time of his death after the atrocious Curse of Michael Myers.
Yeah.
That was the film right before Jamie Lee Curtis came back for the first time. Back when her coming back was a big deal. Now it's just like, oh, she's back again.
Yeah. And it doesn't make sense. Okay. Anyway.
So Laurie in the new series is played by an actress named, not saying in the news, in the Rob Zombie continuity, is played by an actress named Scout Taylor-Compton. She went through an arduous audition process. She does a really good job. I really like her. I don't have any problem with her. The Laurie in this is, it's not the same Laurie, but it's a different movie. It's just, she just has the same character. She has the same character name, but it's a different sort of interpretation of it. I never had any problem with her or with Laurie. I never really compared her to Jamie Lee Curtis because it's just so different. As I said in before about the structure, you had Loomis in Act 2, which is where Michael is in the asylum, and then in Act 3 is Laurie. She's the star. And Act 3 of the original Rob Zombie Halloween is essentially John Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah.
You have to sit through, the first 2 acts, and then when you get to Act 3, now you're watching the remake of the movie that you love. Danielle Harris, a great bit of gimmicky casting. Danielle Harris played Jamie Lloyd in the previous Halloween films as a little girl, and they brought her back to play Annie in the remake. Again, when I heard the casting of that, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
I remember when we were in Los Angeles when this was about to.
They were filming.
We kept hearing a lot, because we were hearing a lot about it at the time.
Yeah, they were filming it at that time. And they shot in the same neighborhoods. Yeah. Where John Carpenter shot the original film, which the film is set in Haddonfield, Illinois. All of the films are. The original Halloween was shot in Los Angeles, which there are there are several shots where if you look in the background you can see palm trees, which obviously would not be in Illinois, but but it's pretty good because as you know, in Los Angeles there are neighborhoods that look like you could turn a corner, you'd be on Sunset Boulevard, turn a corner, and it's like you're in the Midwest somewhere. That's the one amazing thing about Los Angeles is everything you want to shoot is there. If you want to go to the mountains, is there, the beach, the ocean,
which
the
is
desert.
Why they say film moved from New York to
exactly
Hollywood back in the turn of the century.
Hollywood, Cali crazy. Now, as I said before, Michael Myers as a little boy spoke. He communicated with people. He seemed to be able to outwardly project normalcy to some extent. This when he went into the asylum, you see him slowly descending into the silence that we know Michael Myers has, traditionally. His mother is always there for him. She keeps coming. Sherry Moon Zombie keeps coming and visiting him in the asylum. Dr. Loomis is apparently trying to help him. More and more we see of Loomis. This version of Loomis, it seems like he's trying to get more of a book out of the situation than he is trying to really help the boy. More on that in Halloween Part 2. The Act 2 ends with the suicide of Sherry Moon Zombie. Michael Myers' mother, having lost one child to murder, a murder committed by the other child, kills herself. So her small baby is adopted. Her small baby, Angel, otherwise known as Boo, morning Boo, is adopted by the Strode family. And Michael Myers grows up. And when I say he grows up and he becomes Tyler Mane.
Yeah.
He is absolutely enormous. Tyler Mane, who Rob Zombie had worked with briefly in The Devil's Rejects just prior to this. In this version, of course, Michael Myers escapes. He escapes a little bit differently by killing Danny Trejo. And this time Michael can't drive because Rob Zombie's going for this realistic thing. He's like trying to do the Christopher Nolan thing for Halloween. He's like, we're going to take all the mystery and supernatural qualities out of Michael Myers. In the original film, as you know, Michael Myers escapes the asylum and drives away. It doesn't make any sense why Michael Myers would be able to drive because he's been in there since he was a child, never learned how to drive. But you go with it because, you know, there's a supernatural quality to Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Even though it's not overly, you know, crazy. He's not flying around.
He keeps coming back. He keeps coming back.
You just can't kill that bastard. But God knows I want them to kill him, but they just won't do it. Imagine the impact if you actually killed Michael Myers. It'll never happen. But.
They always do that. Like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
And then a year later, we got a sequel.
And in our little epilogue to this show, I'll give you my opinion on the future of this. But Michael Myers can't drive. As you were saying, the production began while you and I were out in LA while we were living there. God, thank God we don't live there now. Back in January of 2007. Now, the original ending of this Halloween movie was... Here's the thing with Rob Zombie, okay? He writes these scripts, he shoots the movie, and then he does and then he cuts it together, he looks at it. Sometimes he even releases the fucking thing. And then he goes back and he reshoots things and recuts it. So sometimes you can see two different movies depending on whether you went to the theater to see it or whether you buy it on DVD.
Yeah.
My problem with that is as you know, I'm kind of a stickler for continuity. I mean, call me crazy, but I think you should maybe maintain continuity as best you can.
Yeah.
So my thing, which really irritates me, as you know, about these times when continuity means nothing, you know, you write yourself in a corner and you just reboot it, which is silly. Call me old-fashioned. But the thing about these Halloween movies is I'm like, which one of these is the official canon? Is it the one I saw in the theater, or is it the one I have on DVD? Because there's two fucking different endings depending on which, and you know, drastically different endings. Because the original ending of this movie, of the original Rob Zombie Halloween, had, you know, Michael Myers captures Laurie outside his old house. Loomis shows up, and the cops show up. And Loomis talks Michael Myers into giving Laurie up, you know, letting her go. Laurie steps away from Michael Myers, and then the cops open fire, and Michael Myers dies in a hail of bullets. And the film ends with Laurie and Loomis standing over his body with the cops around. Now, that's one ending. The ending that everybody has now on DVD is...
Yeah, this is the one I know, yeah. The DVD one.
Yeah, that's the one where Michael Myers is. It goes on longer. There's a long chase with Laurie in the house.
Yeah.
The big question about this version of Michael Myers is: does he want to kill Laurie, or is he just trying to reunite with her? Because, you know, he seems to have some sort of, because he loved Boo, Martin Boo. He loved Boo when she was a baby. That's made clear in the early scenes of the movie. And when he sees Laurie again here, he gives her that picture of the two of them. And, you know, he doesn't speak because apparently he's past speaking, which is fine. But he gives her this photograph and tries to get her to understand. She doesn't understand what he's trying to tell her because to her, it's just a photograph of a little boy and a baby. She doesn't understand that's her as the baby. She just thinks this fucking guy's trying to kill her like he killed all of her friends. So she gets away. He chases her through the house. There's a big deal where Loomis shows up, but instead of talking Michael down, it's just kind of odd because they use some footage from the original ending. So if you look behind Loomis when he's in the house and he's talking Michael down, even though the cops aren't supposed to be there, behind him you can see lights. In the final, you can see the cops rotating lights, which is a little bit of a mistake.
Yeah.
Because it's like why?
Nobody will miss. They'll never notice.
Because he's supposed to be alone, and it's like, why are all the cops sitting back there doing nothing? But anyway, Michael grabs Loomis's head, and he seems to kind of crush it. But Loomis isn't dead because he grabs Michael's leg and tries to hold on to him to keep him from going after Laurie. But you know, Michael's just like, "Get off me, punk!" and knocks his hands away.
He does it silently, though.
Yeah, he doesn't say that. He seems to say, "Get off me, punk," and in that very voice. And so, and then upstairs, Lori and him, they grab each other and they grapple, go out the window across the roof and land on the yard. And then she has the gun. She's sitting on top of him. And this was the moment where I kind of went, oh, this is real interesting, because she puts the gun to Michael's head and pulls the trigger, and her face is splattered with so much brain matter. It's like the Rob Zombie thing, overkill of just brains and fucking skull and everything. And I went, oh my God, they shot Michael Myers in the fucking face. He's dead.
He's dead.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
I've waited years for this.
Little did you know.
Little did I know. And I remember as you know, we were shooting Pop Skull. Adam Wingard and I were shooting that film Pop Skull that I did, which was the second film I did with Adam Wingard at the time. I remember vividly sitting in the yard of a location, which was actually my grandmother's house, where we were shooting a scene from Pop Skull. And Adam had seen the movie and I hadn't. And I told Adam, there's there's going to be a sequel. And Adam was like, I don't think there's going to be a sequel. You should see how this ends, because, brains, blood matter, overkill, spaghetti, guacamole gun right in the face. So he was convinced there would not be a sequel. And I was like, okay. And then I saw the movie and I was like, oh, yeah, maybe there won't be a sequel because, brains, blood, guacamole.
Yeah. He can't grow a brain back.
His head is gone. And remember, we're doing the realistic thing. Because even in this movie, when Michael gets shot a few times, it seems to kind of hurt him. Like he slows down. He's not just standing there taking it. So going with that mentality, naturally, I thought, this is maybe it. Okay, cool, great. I've been waiting years for this, as I've said before. Unfortunately, this movie, I won't say unfortunately, because it's very good for the Cad family and for Dimension Films. It made $80 million on a $15 million budget. So when you started getting that sort of a gross return, obviously...
Sequels.
Yeah.
Let's talk a sequel. And he's like, I wanted ultra realistic. Well, we'll bring him back supernaturally.
And and Rob Zombie...
has he ever talked about part 1 is the ultra realistic, part 2 is more supernatural?
Well, he kind of... He gets around it. I think maybe at first, because he didn't want to come back for a sequel.
Yeah.
He actually told them he wasn't interested in doing it. The first one was very, very difficult on him. It was the first kind of big movie he did. I think it was a lot of pressure, and there was a lot of, you're doing a Halloween now. You're not doing your own stuff. So you have a
lot of expectation.
Yes, and you had a certain set. I mean, obviously, he broke a lot of rules and didn't follow the same formula, but still, there were certain things you had to do because it was a Halloween movie.
Yeah.
And I think Rob Zombie wasn't used to that. He was used to doing his own thing. He can control anything. He can do whatever he wanted.
Yeah. Well, you don't have, I mean, I think I would rather, when you're creative, you want to,
do what you want to do. And obviously, in this situation, the Cads are not going to let him kill off Michael Myers. Even though he did.
What did John Carpenter ever say anything about that? Like, yes, they finally did it. What's he like?
I don't know. I don't know what he said about that. I know that when he was asked about Rob Zombie's Halloween, he didn't like the approach to Michael Myers because naturally he liked his own approach. I mean, he liked that Michael was a force of nature and you didn't know where he came from and all that kind of stuff, which is definitely an approach that I'm fine with. I'm sure the fans love it. As we were talking about before, a lot of fans didn't like Rob Zombies for that very reason, because Michael Myers is in this version a human, just a normal psychopath. Mm-hmm. It just so happens he's a fucking giant, a former wrestler. But
what are they feeding him in that institution?
I don't know. I mean, for me, even the stuff with the masks, that he's obsessed with making masks and the whole psychology behind it, that he's trying to hide himself behind the mask, that's why he wears it. I find that kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. So that's why he wears the mask, because he doesn't want you to see his face, because his face is, he's trying to hide. It's his armor, so to speak. Like, okay, cool. But anyway, like I was saying, after this huge success of Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween Part 1, Malik Akkad said he confirmed that a sequel was in the works at a convention called 30 Years of Terror in 2008. And originally, Rob Zombie was not going to return for the movie for the aforementioned reasons.
Yeah.
They had some other filmmakers who wrote a script for it. I don't think Malik was very pleased with the script. I think he wanted Rob Zombie to return.
Yeah.
And after a year went by and Rob Zombie sort of chilled out a little bit, and, I guess everything kind of got back to normal, he felt, well,
He had a
maybe
break. He had a break from it.
he needed a break and he got one. And then that's when he decided to come back. And what really brought him back, I think, was Malik saying that you're going to have more creative control. Throw away the rule book. You're free to do whatever you want. This is yours. Because obviously, when you did the first one, you had to remake the original film. I mean, there's a certain expectation there. Now you don't have to remake anything. Now you can start where you left off at the end of the first Halloween and just do whatever you want to do. And that's what he did, And so the way he got around this whole brains, guacamole gun splat was that Michael Myers had just been winged. Now, how you wing someone from point blank range and have all their brains splatter on your face, I don't know. But that's what we're going with. She winged him.
Oh, yeah.
This version of Laurie is the worst shot in the history of worst
shot. You had the gun to his head and you missed.
Right. And even though all of his brain splattered on you, you just winged him. So that's what they went with. That's fine, I guess. They wanted to concentrate more on the bond between Michael and Laurie and Halloween 2. And let me just say, I think that a lot of the fans seem to really hate this movie.
Yeah.
And maybe they hate it because it's so different. Because Rob Zombie really did take it and do his own thing with it. And I give him props for that.
Yeah, having the kahoonies to go.
Yeah, and just do just anything he wanted to do with it. I don't love the movie, but there are certain aspects of it I think are great. I mean, even though I don't love it, I will say that there's certain things that I think really work in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. It's just such a mouthful to have to put Rob Zombies in front of, but you have to just try to keep clear since there's so many fucking Halloweens and Halloween 2. Yeah. I'll give you an example. The interpretation of Laurie Strode in this, I think, is really interesting. What he wanted to do was he wanted to realistically show the effects of PTSD and how this would affect the life of a person if they went through such an extreme situation.
Which is interesting because the one that came out a while ago kind of did that a little bit.
You mean
the one with Jamie Lee? Yeah.
The second one with her?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Because she was very.
And here's my problem with. I don't want to get into that one too much.
I know.
Here's my problem with that. Now that you mention it, I can't let it go.
I know. I didn't. I didn't like that one at all. I didn't.
The problem with me
couldn't.
is in Halloween 2018, Laurie Strode, as played by Jamie Lee Curtis, her life is torn to shreds. She is a doomsday prepper. She's terrified of Michael Myers.
She's turned into Sarah Connor.
But the problem is that in this continuity, where only Halloween 1 took place and she's not the sister, you had 15 minutes of scare.
Yeah.
Why are you so... I mean, think about people who escaped Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
They're not living in compounds fearing that, what I'm saying is she should have been able to get over that.
Yeah.
In 40 years, she's still terrified by a 15-minute, basically, ordeal in which this guy came after her.
I mean, you would have anxiety, but not to that.
And then he was caught.
Yeah.
It's not like, Loomis looked out and his body was gone and where is he?
I mean,
he's been in jail for 40 years. Why would you think he would get out?
Yeah, I mean, maybe when he did get out, she'd be like, oh, crap. But still, if there's no connection between them besides that.
And if only that film happened.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, if she's not his sister, there's no connection. Yeah. So what, she might go, oh, well, I hope he does, I'd be a little anxiety ridden. I'd probably have a gun next to my bed just in case, but I wouldn't be as.
Yeah, it just doesn't, to me, I didn't buy
Yeah.
that version of Lori. I didn't buy that she would be that traumatized over basically running away from a guy, locking a door, and then watching him get shot.
Yeah.
Now we think that she should be, because we've seen all these other fucking movies where
Exactly.
he's gotten out every other year and everything. This version, the Jamie Lee Curtis version, is like he never got out again.
Yeah.
He got out one time, chased a girl for 15 minutes, and has been in the asylum for 40 years. There's no reason to think he's a major threat.
Yeah, and also he's older now.
Yes.
And he's not this supernaturally invincible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He's like the Tyler, now coming back to this, the Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. He's like Tyler Mane, except his brains didn't get blown out and then go back in.
They boomeranged.
I love that Lori in this version of Halloween, in the Rob Zombie version, I love that her psychiatrist is Margot Kidder. I just think that that's such an excellent bit of casting, because by that point Margot had had many psychological problems of her own, and to show her voice, and then to have her be the psychiatrist trying to help Lori is great. The original kid who played Michael Myers did not return for Rob Zombie's Part 2 because he'd gotten too tall between the two films. So he was replaced by another little boy who didn't really look much like him, but he was cute. He was cute and he was blonde, and so we can go with that. Scout described this version of Lori as being much more bipolar. She's a real bitch. And I kind of like that. Because in the original film, you kind of like this kid. She was precocious. She joked around with her mother, Dee Wallace, and, she was maybe a little annoying to people who don't like annoying teenagers. But I bought her as an annoying teenager. In the sequel, she's all kinds of fucked up. Annie and her father, the sheriff, Brad Dourif, who I cannot go through the show without mentioning. I'm such a Brad Dourif fan. They've taken Lori in, which is a great thing to do, because her, obviously her original parents are gone. Her foster parents are gone. Everybody she loved is gone. So the best friend of Lori's takes them in and helps to raise her and help her through this whole thing. And Lori is such a complete bitch to her friend who is only trying to help her, and whose father is supporting this teenager. Again, though, I totally buy it. I don't like, but I buy this version of Lori. And I think it's actually an interesting way of going. I think that Scout Taylor-Compton, try saying that 5 times. I think that she does a really tremendous job as an actress. So I can't really fault her. Loomis, as I sort of alluded to earlier in this version, has gone total sellout. Like, he has written books. He's become the guy that just is trying to wring
He went Sylvia Brown on them.
He's trying to wring every bit of fame and money that he can out of this whole Michael Myers ordeal.
Yeah. All those books.
And he's doing these lectures, and he's kind of a funny character. He's played a lot for humor in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. And Malcolm McDowell, you can tell, is just absolutely enjoying this. He doesn't have much to do in the story until the very, very end, depending on which version of the end that you've seen. Because, as I mentioned before, Rob Zombie tends to have 3 or 4, depending on where you watched it, in the theater or on DVD, which really bothers me. There's a really great scene. I'll tell you, this is one scene that I think is wonderful in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. As I said before, Danielle Harris played Annie. She returned for the film. She is actually murdered. She was attacked in the first one. She's murdered in the sequel. And there's a moment in there where Lori discovers her friend's body, her friend who she's been a complete bitch to this whole time, and goes nuts, goes completely emotionally crazy over finding her friend having been murdered. And then there is a scene where Brad Dourif, the father, comes to the house and finds his daughter, and all the cops are trying to keep him back because they're like, you don't want to go in there. He goes in there, And I think that the scene that follows there is probably one of the most honest representations of what it would really be like if this happened in real life. Because you have an emotional reaction to this father finding his daughter butchered in their house. And you go, yes, like, thank you, Rob. For one time, you know, you're showing that in these sorts of situations, usually in movies, the character dies, your best friend dies, your mother dies, your brother dies, everybody dies that you love, and you just kind of brush it off and you move on with the story. Here you see that if this actually was to happen, that it is such a devastating experience to have someone you love be murdered that you would just fall completely to pieces. And in that moment, you do see what happens when Brad Dourif finds his daughter, and you go, you totally buy the emotion that this man has fallen to pieces because his daughter, has been butchered. And you go, well, if more horror films showed that, you would have great emotional reactions, and you would feel something for these characters. They wouldn't just be,
just another piece of meat that they sliced up.
Right. And I still to this day think that's one of the most emotional moments I've ever seen in a horror movie, certainly in a slasher movie. Call me sentimental, but I find that to be very affecting. Now, I did want to point that out because I think it's a great piece of acting as well for Brad Dourif, who is a wonderful actor and really showed, that you can act in a horror movie and be very affecting in that scene. Now, one thing Rob Zombie said about this movie was he said that no matter how much other people change, and as I said, Laurie is different in this. She's PTSD, crazy bitch, but not irredeemable. Loomis is really irredeemable in this. Yeah. He's become a complete sellout, and now people make fun of him to the point where he's almost ashamed that he did it himself because he's become like the celebrity doctor joke,
Yeah.
So people have changed. You see that the sheriff in the movie, Brad Dourif's character, he's just a worn out guy trying to deal with these two teenage girls. And he's like, oh man, I can't do it. So there's been character progression, but Rob Zombie said that the one character that never progresses, in his opinion, is Michael Myers.
Yeah.
In Michael Myers' mind, he's still the 10-year-old boy. The world goes on, changes around him, but he doesn't change. Even though he does have kind of a new look. This is the most you get to see of Michael Myers' face up until this point. And really up until now, because they kind of showed his face a little bit in the new version, but not really so much. And you see a lot of Taylor Maine's face in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Because the mask is sort of rotting away, like part of it's fallen off, because the mask is quite a few years old at this point, and he never gets new masks like he did in the previous films. It's still theoretically the same mask he had when he was a little boy, so it's all rotting and shit. Movie was shot in Georgia, in and around Atlanta. Now, a few people that I know went up and in that area were in this movie. This movie was shot for $15 million. Rob Zombie basically said that there was a lot of snow elsewhere in the country, and so they decided to go to Atlanta and to the Georgia area because of the tax breaks, number one, and number two, there was no fucking snow.
The weather, yeah.
And it had that mood, and as you know, in the country in the South, with the trees and the darkness, it does have a kind of a mood to it. And I think he really liked the mood and thought it would add to the grittiness to shoot in the South. So he did. Again, like I said, there are two different endings to this movie. There's the theatrical ending. In the theatrical ending, what happens is, Loomis has gone on a television show, a talk show with Weird Al Yankovic, and even Weird Al is making fun of Loomis at this point. So Loomis is like kind of down in the dumps because he feels like he's a sellout. I've become a joke. So he sees on the news, for some reason, broadcast live everywhere in Haddonfield, Michael Myers is trapped in this shed. I don't know if that would be nationally broadcast, but okay. I'll go with it. He sees that on TV, and he's like, well, I can go and help this situation. And part of you're not quite sure if if Loomis wants to go help the situation because he's really genuinely turned around.
Or he's trying to turn his career around.
Exactly. Maybe this is more publicity. The guy who, Michael Myers' doctor, is going to come and try and save this girl yet again from Michael Myers. So he rushes down there, and Michael has Laurie in this little, dirty, nasty Rob Zombie woodshed. And in the original ending, Loomis goes in there, and then Michael and Loomis, they crash through the wall out into the field, and Michael stabs Loomis, and Michael speaks for the first time in all these years since he was a little boy and tells Loomis to die and all that, right? And then the cops shoot Michael Myers. And Loomis, you don't know if he's dead or not, but he's laying there and he's been stabbed and he's all fucked up. So maybe he's dead or dying. Then you see Laurie come out of the shed. And she puts on Michael Myers' mask. And she picks up the knife. And she goes over to Loomis. And you think she's going to stab Loomis. And then all the cops start shooting her. And apparently Laurie is gunned down in the original version. You see her laying there dead. And then you have a moment where you see her in this weird, like, Lords of Salem hospital hallway. And her mother is down because the whole time Michael and her have been sharing delusions, seeing their dead mother. And you go, why would Laurie see her dead mother? Because she never.
Yeah.
So it creates that sort of, it plants this thing in your mind where you go, well, are they psychically connected? Is this really like a supernatural ghost thing? Is the mother really coming to them wearing a white dress next to a white horse? Or does Rob Zombie just want to make sure his wife is in part 2? Personally, I'm going to go with the latter. But so there's this whole Nights in White Satin, a lot of moody blues, and there she is with the white fucking horse. They couldn't get John Carpenter's theme in until the very end, but that fucking Nights in White Satin, they get that in plenty. So that's the original theatrical ending. Yeah. Now the ending on DVD is totally different. She doesn't really get gunned down. There's none of that die stuff. Loomis's head is crushed, I think, yet again in the woodshed. It still happens in a woodshed, and Michael is apparently killed. But it does have that same little ending at the very, very end with her sitting in the weird hospital hall, but she's still alive. And you go, oh, well, she's crazy and she's in the hospital, and now she's seeing her mother with the horse, Nights in White Satin, and all that.
Yeah.
Did you like my rendition of Nights in Satin?
It's very good. It's very good. You should do a Moody Blues cover band.
I should, absolutely. Mm-hmm. That's the only real song of theirs that I know the lyrics for. So there'll be a lot of Nights in White Satin.
Oh, okay. So you didn't know? Okay, right.
No, not all of us have musically encyclopedic knowledge of everything.
Okay. Okay. Well, same thing to you. Yeah.
Yeah, about the movies, right? I should say though that. Rob Zombie had a lot of his regulars in both of these movies. In the first one, you had William Forsythe, who we'd worked with in Devil's Rejects, as Ronnie. I can't say Ronnie without laughing because all I ever think about is morning, dude. You had Ken Foree as Big Joe Grizzly, who, by the way, is not from Mobile, Alabama, no matter what
IMDb
says. I once saw Ken Foree be asked that question. And he's like, I've never been to Mobile, Alabama. I have no idea. So don't always believe everything you see on IMDb. Richard Lynch was in the original. Dee Wallace was in the original, E.T.'s mom. In part 2, you had Daniel Roebuck. It's Big Lou, which is just the classic Rob Zombie character name, Big Lou. You had Richard Brake with his crazy smile and crazy teeth and crazy laugh. This was the first film that they did together. Obviously, they would go on to do 31 and 3 from Hell. And you had Mark Boone Jr., who went on to do pretty much every movie since then with... go ahead. You want to say something?
Oh, no, I was thinking about, like, all the different endings. I was like, I wonder if, like, anyone's ever, like, edited them together and, like, done like a Wayne's World ending. You know, remember Wayne's World? They
Oh,
always had like 15 different endings, and then someone comes like, or we could give them this ending.
yeah, doodle doodle doodle. That would be great if, like, Malcolm McDowell's Loomis just popped up and was like, and then this happened. He's all fucking bloodied up. And he's like, doodle doodle doodle. Good call.
Do you think we could get that? Do you think you make some calls? And...
See if I can get Malcolm McDowell to come in for
that's right.
Blue screen shoot.
Yeah.
Possibly. I don't know. I'll work on that.
Okay.
Now.
And your moody blue cover band.
Yes, nights and lights. Let's see if I can get Sherry Moon Zombie to stand behind me with that fucking white horse. What else is she doing other than her husband's next movie? Now
you're so bitter about it.
No, I think it's great that they work together. It's wonderful. John Carpenter, his music. Now, here's my theory about why John Carpenter's theme does not appear except at the very end of Halloween 2. John Carpenter criticized Rob Zombie's first Halloween movie. You know that John Carpenter really only gets money from Halloween based on the theme music.
Yeah.
I think, now I could be wrong, and this is just my opinion, I'm going to say for legal purposes. I think Rob Zombie got so pissed that John Carpenter dissed his first movie that he said, motherfucker, you ain't getting a check for this one. I'm going to use Moody Blues. I'm going to use Love Hurts. I'm going to use everything I possibly can except for your theme music.
I'll use Pee Wee Herman's theme before I use yours.
Motherfucker, I'm going to use the Halloween theme never again. Even in a Halloween movie. And he tried. He almost got by with it. Because the only time you hear Halloween, the theme, is at the very end over the credits.
And you think the producers made him put it in, probably. Or a test audience. They're like, where's the music?
I honestly think it was probably something like that. I think the producers were like, okay, Rob, listen. You know this is a Halloween movie. And you know the one thing people know even more, probably, arguably, even more than the name of the killer. Michael Myers. More people know that theme.
Yeah.
You can't not have it in the movie. He tried to get by with it. And, he said a lot of things about when he was editing the movie. They tried to put it in different places and it never fit. And I'm like, motherfucker, they've made so many of these Halloween movies at this point and stuck that theme in randomly.
Do you think that was a dig at Carpenter as well, that comment?
Maybe. I don't know. But, I do think it's a bullshit comment.
Yeah.
I think that, because like I was saying, they've made so many of these fucking things. They stuck that music randomly into every single possible scene that they could. You're telling me you couldn't find one scene in this movie where that music fit?
Yeah, like a chase scene.
Yeah.
Him running.
The crazy little hospital scene where she's falling into the vat with all the dead body parts and shit. Yeah, throw it in there. Why not?
Yeah.
You can definitely find places for that music. It's very adaptable. And again, if you can fit Moody Blues in that much in a Halloween movie, you should be able to fit the Halloween theme in there somewhere too. Yes. Now, as I said, though, I do respect the movie for going out of its way to be different. It did not gross as much as the first film. In fact, it grossed about half what the first film did. It made about $40 million. But look, it's not a traditional commercial horror movie. It's a very artsy horror movie. And I don't think that the fans really dug it that much because, as I said before, it wasn't like Halloween 4. It wasn't like Halloween 5. It wasn't like Curse of Michael Myers. It was so different.
Halloween 30.
And that's the thing about this stuff is I think that as much as fans say they want different stuff, and a lot of times with these franchise pictures, they don't want it to be different. They want it essentially to be what they've seen before.
Yes.
And if it's not, they say, why isn't it what I saw before? My point of view is, why do you want to watch something you've already seen before?
Yeah.
But that's just me. I mean, I'm not big into the whole 30 sequel type thing.
No.
I think that the new one is such a cash grab and such it's
Why
ridiculous.
hasn't why do you think John Carpenter hasn't been like, yeah, I'll do another one? He's just like, no.
Well, he produces the new ones,
Okay.
and he's doing the
I
music.
meant
So
like,
he is. You mean direct?
yeah.
I don't think he wants to direct anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's done with directing. He stopped really with Ghosts of Mars way back in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
and then years later he did The Ward. That didn't go anywhere, and I just think he just wants to kind of hang out at the house.
Yeah.
Honestly, from interviews I've seen, because he does talk a lot about like, man, that's a lot of work. It's
Yeah.
like I want to watch basketball and baseball, and I want to play Xbox. I don't want to, directing a movie is work. And that's what he's always saying. Um,
Oh gosh, I watched. Speaking of him, I know this is off topic. I watched Body Bags
oh well,
about 2 weeks ago.
no, that's right up the alley of a John Carpenter fan. What'd you think of it?
Well, I'd seen it when I was younger because, surprise, I'm
Mark
a Mark
Hamill.
Hamill fan. Yes, so I'd seen it. Yes, look at his poor face. But he didn't do that segment. Toby was
Yeah,
Toby
what
Hooper did.
Toby Hooper did, yeah, he did
Yeah,
a couple of them, yeah.
yeah, he did that one with Mark Hamill about the
Yes.
eyeball that took over and possessed him. But
Which is
but
that's such a Toby Hooper idea.
yeah. Um, and it was interesting seeing him, particularly as kind of like the Crypt Keeper type, because obviously it was supposed to be a TV show, and then it didn't go, so they just released it as an anthology film. So it was interesting him as like the corpse who's like, hey, I'm like the Crypt Keeper, but I'm not.
He did a pretty good job, I thought, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of surprised that seeing it as an adult. I mean, you saw it as a kid, and you're like, oh, okay, and then seeing it as an adult, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember this now. He's the host,
And it's not
kind of.
it's not really that. I with Body Bags. Here's the thing. I really like the first segment at the gas station.
Yeah.
Then I tend to turn it off.
Yeah, you didn't
Because
make it to Mark.
I very rarely make it to Mark because the hair thing one loses me. I'm like,
and Twiggy is in Mark Hamill, like I'm calling Mark, like he's a personal friend. Twiggy plays his wife, I think, the model.
And I wouldn't have mind seeing that turn into a show. I think that might have been kind of interesting, but we didn't get to see that. I just want to say as we're wrapping up here,
sorry, it's a sidebar.
That Halloween has been rebooted for the upteenth time with the Halloween 2018, which I did a whole show about, and I won't talk about that too much. But there's
link it in the description so people can refer.
I might do that. But there's about to be a sequel to that, which I think because of the Rona has been pushed back a year. But it's called Halloween Kills is the next one, and then there's actually going to be two more: Halloween Kills and then Halloween Ends. To which I say, poof. Ha! Halloween ends, yeah, for 2 years until you reboot the fucking thing again. I'm almost
that kind of hurts the stories for me because I'm like, yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
because like, yeah, he'll be back. Okay, whatever. This doesn't really count because there'll be more.
None of it counts. That's the thing about these kind of movies. None of it counts. I
feel like
there's no high stakes because the character is not going to die. None of these people are in danger. As long as Jamie Lee Curtis is alive and has a bank account, she's going to come back to do more. So it does. The impact is lost.
I usually just stick with the first two now because there've been so
many,
and it's tiresome. So if I do watch it, it'll be those two.
I agree. Those are kind of my two favorites. I don't mind the Rob Zombie thing because at least he was doing something different.
Yeah, it was watch it one time, but it's not one that I would probably.
I understand.
A lot of them, I'm going to revisit. Oh, I'm going to pop this in. I'm in the mood to watch this.
Well, the first one is compulsively rewatchable. I'm talking about the John Carpenter.
Yes, it is.
The actual
it is.
Halloween is compulsive. It's compulsively rewatchable. The Rob Zombie one is not compulsively rewatchable.
Yeah.
You kind of have to be in the mood for it.
Yeah.
Because it is dark and it doesn't go down very easily necessarily, and it is very kind of assaulting in the way it portrays the violence and you just have to be in the mood to watch something
Yeah.
like that. It's like I got to be in the mood to watch Rob Zombie movies because sometimes I don't necessarily just want to see sadomasochistic porn, you know,
Yeah.
and and
It's
dirty
not. It's
underwear.
not. Yeah. It's not like a pizza night movie.
No. Um, but anyway, we've kind of reached our time. That was our
Yes.
show. That was our show on the Rob Zombie Halloween films. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Rebecca, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And until next week, I want to tell all you guys to stay safe during the coronavirus, self isolate, do everything people are trying to tell you to do, because that's the only way that this is ever going to end. And by God, I don't know
Wear
about you.
your mask like Michael Myers.
I don't know about you, but I'm ready for this to end. So
Yes.
let's all work together to get there, okay?
Yeah.
So until then, take care of yourselves. Have a good one.